Hello everyone, welcome to the Bluebook Records. So in Rule 16 we're talking about periodical materials. And with this I'm usually always thinking about law review articles. So the basic citation form, we start with the author's name, set off by a comma, and we don't use any particular small caps or anything. We're just using the regular font, followed by the title of the article in italics, set off by a comma, not in italics, and the journal volume number, followed by the journal abbreviation, followed by the title of the page on which the article begins, set off by a comma, and then the pin cite, the specific pages you're citing to, followed by the date of publication in parentheticals, and then whatever parenthetical you have describing the content of the pages cited. Again, ending in a period. So in Rule 16.1, we kind of have a list of basic citation forms. So the first one would be an article in a consecutive paginated journal, article in a non-consecutively paginated journal or magazine, newspaper articles, these are periodicals, online newspaper article, student written, law review note. So in this situation, we would be adding note behind the author's name. So for a newspaper article, notice that we have the author, the title, the name of the newspaper in small caps. The name of the journal is in small caps. Online newspaper articles, we're adding the date in parentheses and the URL. And then usually when we're adding URLs now, we want to add a permanent URL. And the most popular permanent URL in use is perma.cc, which we'll talk about in a later rule. If it's a symposium article, add symposium at the beginning. Etc. So Rule 16.2, the author. We list the author in ordinary Roman type at the beginning. If there's more than one author, we separate it. We set off either author with an ampersand. If there's more than two authors, you set off, you only use the first author and use it all. That's ET space AL period set off by a comma. If it's important to you, if there's three authors, you can always set off the first two authors by a comma and the last two authors by an ampersand. With the ampersand, we don't use a comma. So Rule 16.3, the title. We add the title as it appears on the title page, but we're using the capitalization conventions found in Rule 8. Again, unless it's not English, then we move to Rule 20. We don't abbreviate words or omit words, omit articles in the title. And we're using italics. So the question is, like, if the title contains italics, what do we do with those italics? You switch those back to ordinary Roman type. So Rule 16.4, consecutively paginated journals. So here we are using the you state the volume which it's in, and then you add the first page of the work where the article specifically appears, and then you're using the year enclosed in parentheses at the end. Again, the pin site is offset by a comma. So you have the first page where the article starts, and then you offset it by a comma, and then you have your specific pin site. Some journals have different page numbering systems, include those special page numbering conventions. Some law reviews will have a special issue that's kind of outside of their usual volume and therefore usual pagination system. Then cite it the same way in this rule, but then in a parenthetical describe the special issue. So usually it's by special issue. And in here we're using large or small caps. So sometimes there will be no volume number, but nonetheless consecutively paginated. In this situation, we put the year of publication, and we substitute the year of publication for what would be the volume number. And then we omit the reference to that year. So you'll have year, and then name of the law review in small caps and abbreviated, and then the page number on which the article starts, set off by a comma, the pin site, and then directly period, no date. So now non-consecutively paginated journals and magazines. So here, just note that Bluebook says we are citing the author, title of the work, periodical name, date of issue, on the cover, the word at, then the first page of the work, and then our pin site. So we can see the first example here in Rule 16.5, citing the Harvard Business Review. So we have a Harvard Business Review in small caps, abbreviated according to our normal conventions, set off by a comma, and then the date of issue as it appears on the cover, set off by another comma, at date on, or page on the on which the article starts, set off by another comma, and our pin site. So just remember this kind of date at change, right? As opposed to our consecutively paginated journals. So if there is no date of issue available, then Bluebook says we are providing the issue number in its place and indicating the volume number before the title of the periodical, and include the year and month of copyright if available. So now newspapers. This is Rule 16.6. So in general, we are citing to materials in a newspaper the same way we would cite in a non-consecutively paginated periodicals, which is we just talked about in Rule 16.5. There are 3 exceptions, the Bluebook points out. We need to designate the work as an editorial, opinion, letter to the editor, etc., in ordinary Roman type after the author's name and before the title. And if there's no author, then it just starts with that designation. The second exception would be after the date. We need to put the section of the newspaper where the piece is found. And then the third exception would be we only give the first page of the piece, and we don't cite the location of the specific material. So there are a couple of examples here. R.E. Goldman, comma, title of the work, comma, New York Times in small caps, comma, date on which that article appeared, set off by another comma, at, and then the section of the newspaper where it was found, A1 in this particular situation. There are a couple more examples here. Now, place of publication. We add this in parenthetical after the name of the newspaper if it's not clear from the name of the newspaper, the location, the place of publication. So they gave 2 examples of Times, right? Times needs a parenthetical to make it clear that it's London we're talking about. Chronicle of Higher Education, DC. So consecutively paginated newspapers. Now we're just moving back to Rule 16.4. So it will look almost exactly like a law review. Wire services, it's like Reuters. We still cite to the print newspaper they're published. Sorry, like AP right? The Associated Press will still cite to the printed newspaper where you've found it, right? Or web page or whatever, the commercial database. But we're only, if you're able to cite to the wire service itself, then add that in small caps. Commercial electronic databases, we'll cite those in Rule 16.8, so we'll get to those in a minute. Internet and online newspapers, we'll get to that in Rule 18. But just know that you can use online newspapers in place of print newspapers. But we need to cite to online versions according to Rule 18. And special citation forms. So there's a lot here. So student written law review materials. This is Rule 16.7.1. Basically here we're just adding comment, capital C comment, or note, capital N note, after the author. Sometimes you'll have what's known as unsigned student written material. So this is like not it's student material, but not attributable to a single author. Then you'll just start with the word note. Student written book reviews, you add a designation of book note, and then followed by a parenthetical indicating the work that's being reviewed. Non-student written book reviews, you don't have to put book review, but still add the parenthetical afterwards of the reviewing book that you're using. So symposia, surveys, etc. We just start with that designation in regular Roman type before the title. Commentaries, other designations, be sure to add commentary, attribute, in memoriam, those kind of special designations after the author, but before the title. Sometimes you'll see an article appearing in more than one part. Just identify those parts in a parenthetical. And the parenthetical would be found right after the title of the work. Annotation. This is another designation that goes after the author's full name in ordinary Roman type. And then just check out if you're using proceedings, regular publications by whatever institutes, or newsletters, and things that aren't really commercially distributed in Rule 16.7. So Rule 16.8, this is electronic media and online sources. When you're citing to a database, provide the complete citation to the document and then a citation to the database, like Westlaw. Westlaw might have a unique identifier that they're using. Add that to the citation as well. Bluebook allows you to cite to the direct citation and the electronic database simultaneously. But for where the print version is accessible, citations should be made to the print version. But when the print version is hard to find, or when the government has said, okay, this online version is an official version, or this electronic version is the official version, then you can cite to the electronic version, according to Rule 18, which we'll get to in a minute. Short citation forms. Once the periodical has been cited in full, we can use id or supra. Use id if you're referring to the previous authority, if it's the sole authority in the previous footnote. Using supra, we include the author's name before supra. When there's no author, we use the title of the piece, the designation of the piece, or whether you may have used a here and after in brackets, use that as well. And you can refer to their example footnotes 6 through 10, which go through some different examples. Thanks, everybody. That was Rule 16. We'll take a short break and then move to Rule 17.